The moonstone burned, going down like swallowing a coal wrapped in ice. Elara's throat seized her eyes, watering her fingers, clawing at the dirt floor of the herb cellar as the sacred stone scraped past her tonsils and dropped into her stomach with a weight that had nothing to do with its size. Above her, through the floorboards, she could hear them. Boots. Dozens of boots, and the wet crack of someone's jaw breaking, and Elder Marin screaming something about mercy in a voice that had forgotten what mercy sounded like. She pressed her forehead against the cold stone wall and tried not to vomit. The moonstone pulsed once deep in her gut, like a second heartbeat finding its rhythm. Then it pulsed again, and again. Each beat sent silver light through her veins that she could see beneath her skin, threading up her forearms like luminous tattoos before fading. She was going to die down here. She knew that. But the raiders were not going to find the moonstone. That was 20 minutes ago. Now Elara crouched in the dark, with her hand pressed over her abdomen, feeling each pulse radiate warmth through fingers that had been numb for hours. The herb cellar smelled the way it always smelled, like dried rosemary and mouse droppings and the vinegar healer Cora used for her tinctures. But there was something else now. Something underneath. A metallic sweetness like blood mixed with honey seeping from her own pores. The sounds above had changed. The screaming had stopped. That was worse. Elara Voss was 23 years old, the daughter of nobody worth remembering according to the Silver Pine Pack Registry, where her name appeared in the smallest handwriting the clerk could manage, squeezed into the margin, below the legitimate pack members like an afterthought, which she was. She had no wolf. She had never shifted. She had presented as Omega at 13, which would have been tolerable if she had also been pretty, or connected, or useful in any obvious way. Instead, she was the girl who sorted herbs for healer Cora, and slept in the room above the clinic that was technically a supply closet, on a cot that smelled like camphor and old wool. She was not pretty. She had a scar that ran from her left temple to her jawline, courtesy of Marcus, the former Beta's son, who had thrown a glass at her when she was 14, because she had accidentally served him the wrong tea. The scar had healed badly because no one had bothered stitching it. She was thin in the way that suggested meals were optional, her collarbone sharp enough to cast shadows, her wrists like bird bones. But she had hands that knew every herb in Cora's cellar by touch alone. She could tell feverfew from chamomile in total darkness. She could brew a pain tincture that worked in 11 minutes instead of the standard 20. And she had one secret that she kept pressed against her chest like a stolen coin. She could hear the moonstone, not now with it literally inside her body. Before, when it sat in its silver cradle in the Pack Temple, guarded by 2 sentries who never bothered watching it, because who would steal from a goddess? Elara could hear it humming, had heard it since she was 6, a low, constant vibration that lived in her teeth and her fingertips like standing too close to a transformer. She had never told anyone. Omegas who heard things that were not there got sent to the asylum wards in the Eastern Territories, and Elara had enough problems. The cellar door exploded inward. Not opened. Exploded. The hinges tore from the frame, and the heavy oak slab crashed down the stairs, bouncing twice before slamming into the far wall. Dust and splinters filled the air. Elara scrambled backward, pressing herself into the corner between the shelving unit and the wall, her hand still pressed over her stomach, where the moonstone pulsed faster, now matching her racing heart. A figure filled the doorway. Backlit by the orange glow of something burning outside, all she could see was size. The shoulders nearly touched both sides of the frame. The head ducked to clear the lintel, and then he descended each step, deliberate, unhurried, the stairs groaning under his weight. He was not a raider. She knew that immediately, because the raiders had been chaos, had been noise and cruelty, and the stink of cheap whiskey and wolf-spaned smoke. This was something else entirely. This was silence shaped like a man. He reached the bottom of the stairs and stopped. The burning light from above caught his face, and Alara forgot to breathe. He was not handsome, the way the romance scrolls described handsome. His face was too severe for that, the jaw too heavy, the cheekbones too sharp, a nose that had been broken at least twice. His hair was black and cut short, military short, and there was a scar that bisected his right eyebrow and continued down to his cheekbone. His eyes were the color of old amber, the kind that had things trapped inside it, and they were fixed on her with an intensity that made her bladder clench. He was wearing black leather armor that bore the crest she recognized from Cora's history texts, the Iron Fang crest, a wolf's head rendered in silver jaws open set against a crescent moon. Kyle Drakos, the Alpha King of the Iron Fang Dominion, the most feared wolf in 6 territories, was standing in healer Cora's herb cellar, looking at her like she was the only object in the room that mattered. His nostrils flared. Once, twice, his pupils dilated so fast she could see the amber retreating to thin rings around black wells. A sound came from his chest, not a growl exactly, but something deeper, something tectonic. The sound of a massive predator recognizing something it had been searching for without knowing it was searching. Mine. The word was not spoken aloud, but it filled the cellar anyway, vibrating through the shelves, rattling the glass jars, settling into Alara's bones with a certainty that terrified her. Then the moonstone pulsed. Not the gentle warmth it had been radiating. This was a detonation. Silver light erupted from beneath her hand, visible through her threadbare shirt, painting the cellar walls in shifting geometric patterns that looked like the old language, the script that predated all 6 territories. The light was so bright it turned her skin translucent, and she could see her own ribs, her own heartbeat, and there, nestled against her stomach lining like a pearl in an oyster, the moonstone blazing like a trapped star. The Alpha King went absolutely still. "Who are you?" he said. His voice was low and rough, like boots on gravel, and there was something beneath the authority that she could not identify, something almost uncertain. "Nobody," Alara whispered, the automatic response, the safe response, the response she had given every authority figure in her life since she could speak. He moved then, closing the distance between them in 2 strides that covered what should have been 5, and he crouched in front of her. This close she could smell him. Not cologne or soap, pine resin and wood smoke, and something underneath that was purely animal, a musk that made the base of her skull tingle, and her dormant wolf, the wolf she had been told did not exist, stir for the first time in her life, like something deep in her chest turning over in its sleep. His hand came up. She flinched. He stopped. His fingers hovered an inch from her jaw, from the scar that ran from temple to chin, and his expression shifted. The severity cracked. Something old and dangerous moved behind his eyes. "Who did this to you?" Not a question, a demand, as if the answer would determine whether someone lived or died tonight, and the decision had already been made. "It does not matter," she said. "It matters to me." The moonstone pulsed again, and this time she felt his reaction, a full body shudder that ran through his massive frame like a current. His hand closed the remaining distance, and his fingers touched her scar, just the tips feather light, and the contact sent heat racing through her veins. Not painful heat. The heat of a fire after hours in the cold. The heat of being touched by someone whose touch meant something. That light, he said, his eyes dropping to her abdomen, where the glow had faded to a faint shimmer. That is the Silverpine moonstone. Yes. You swallowed it. Yes. He stared at her. She stared back. In the silence between them, she could hear his heartbeat, which should have been impossible at this distance, but there it was strong and steady, and the moonstone was matching it. Not her heartbeat any more. His. Why, he said. Because the raiders would have taken it. You could have died. She almost laughed. It came out as a breath that shook. The moonstone is sacred. It holds the bloodline memory of every wolf born under Silverpine territory for 600 years. 12,000 lives. She met his amber eyes and for once did not look away. It was worth more than me. Something in his jaw tightened. The muscle flexed once, twice. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped to a register that vibrated in her chest. Nothing, he said, is worth more than you. She did not understand what he meant. Not then. She was cold and frightened, and there was a sacred artifact pulsing against her stomach lining, and the most powerful alpha in the known world was crouching in a cellar that smelled like rosemary and mouse droppings, looking at her like she was the answer to a question he had been asking his entire life. Above them, someone called out, "My king! The raiders have been neutralized. 17 captured. The pack leadership is requesting an audience." The Alpha King did not look away from her. He did not even blink. "Tell them to wait," he said. The silence that followed had weight. Elara could feel the soldier above processing the impossibility of what he had just heard. Kyle Drakos did not wait. Kyle Drakos did not tell others to wait. Kyle Drakos arrived, and things happened on his schedule, and everyone in 6 territories had adjusted their clocks accordingly for the last 8 years. So the voice tried again. I said, "Wait." The 2 words dropped like stones into deep water. Elara heard boots retreat hastily. Then the Alpha King turned back to her and did something she did not expect. He shrugged off his leather armor jacket, the movement quick and efficient, and draped it over her shoulders. It was warm from his body heat and impossibly heavy, and it smelled like him pine and smoke, and that animal musk that made her wolf turn over again, more awake now, pressing against the inside of her ribs. "Can you walk?" he asked. "I think so." She stood. Her legs shook. The moonstone shifted inside her, and she gasped, pressing her hand to her stomach as silver light flickered beneath her shirt. He was beside her instantly, his hand on her elbow steadying her, and the contact point radiated heat that spread up her arm and into her chest. She started. "I need to find healer Cora. She can extract the stone safely. She is the only one who knows the dissolution ceremony." "Your healer is alive," he said. "My soldiers found her in the temple. She has a broken arm and 2 cracked ribs, but she will live." Relief hit her so hard her knees buckled. He caught her. Of course he caught her. One arm around her waist, pulling her against his chest, and she could feel his heartbeat through the leather and linen, steady as a metronome, and the moonstone synchronized with it, completely pulsing in perfect time. "I have you," he said. Not gently, not sweetly. He said it the way you say facts. The sky is blue, water is wet. I have you. He guided her up the stairs and out into the night, and the world had changed. The Silverpine village was a mess. 3 buildings were burning, sending orange light and black smoke into a sky thick with stars. Bodies lay in the dirt, most of them raiders, their rough leather armor, marked with the brand of the Hollow Fang exiles, a disbanded pack that had turned to raiding 3 years ago, when their territory was absorbed by the Eastern Coalition. Iron Fang soldiers moved through the wreckage with practiced efficiency, binding prisoners, treating wounded, organizing the surviving Silverpine pack members into groups. And every single person who saw the Alpha King emerge from the cellar with his arm around the waist of Ilara Voss, the scarred Omega, nobody stopped what they were doing and stared. She could feel their eyes. She had always been invisible in this pack. The girl who sorted herbs, the girl with the scar, the girl whose father had been a drifter who passed through one autumn and left nothing behind but a pregnant Omega who died in childbirth. Now she was visible, and she was visible because the Alpha King was touching her, and his expression dared anyone to have an opinion about it. Alpha Dracos. A man pushed through the crowd. Ilara recognized him. Garrett Voss, the Silver Pine Alpha. No relation to her, despite the shared surname. He had made that clear publicly when she was 12, standing in the pack square and announcing that the orphan girl bore his family name by clerical error and was no blood of his. She remembered the way he had not looked at her when he said it, the way he had looked past her, the way you look past furniture. Now he was looking at her, at the Alpha King's arm around her waist, at the fading silver glow beneath her shirt. His face was a complicated thing, my King Garrett said. His voice had the forced steadiness of a man trying very hard not to show fear. We are grateful for your intervention. The Hollowfang raiders struck without warning. We were overwhelmed. Your sentries were drunk, Kyle said. His voice carried no particular judgment, just the flat delivery of someone stating a fact that others had been too afraid to mention. I could smell the alcohol from the eastern ridge. My border patrol picked up distress signals 40 minutes ago. We ran here. 15 miles in 23 minutes. Garrett swallowed visibly. The implications were clear. The Iron Fang Dominion bordered Silverpine to the north, and Kale Dracos had mobilized a strike force and covered 15 miles of rough terrain in 23 minutes because he had heard a neighboring pack in trouble. That was either extraordinary generosity or something else entirely. The Moonstone, Garrett said, his eyes dropping to Ilara's midsection, where the glow was pulsing steadily now. Is it? Did she? She saved it, Kyle said. His arm tightened fractionally around Ilara's waist. She swallowed it to keep it from the raiders. His gaze swept the assembled Silverpine wolves with an expression that made several of them step back. While your sentries were drinking and your warriors were sleeping, this woman saved 600 years of your bloodline memory. Garrett's mouth opened, closed. His eyes met Ilara's for the first time in her memory, truly met them, and what she saw there was not gratitude. It was calculation. She is just an Omega, he said. The Moonstone shouldn't have. It should have burned through her. Any wolf below Gamma rank who touches the Moonstone. He trailed off the implication hanging. Yes, Kyle said softly. It should have killed her. The silence that followed was loaded. Ilara felt every eye on her, felt the Moonstone pulse with something that might have been satisfaction, felt the Alpha King's hand spread wider on her hip, claiming more territory. We need to discuss this privately, Garrett said. No, Kyle replied. What I need is your healer to examine her. The stone needs to come out safely. Everything else can wait. There was a moment, brief but unmistakable, where Garrett considered pushing back. Ilara could see it in the tension of his shoulders, the flicker in his eyes. Then it passed. He had survived as alpha of a mid-ranking pack for 16 years by knowing exactly when to submit, and the Alpha King was not asking. The clinic was mostly intact. One window shattered the front door, hanging from a single hinge, but the treatment room in the back was untouched. Healer Cora was already there, her left arm in a makeshift sling, her grey hair wild around her face, directing 2 Iron Fang medics with the brisk efficiency of someone who had survived worse. When she saw Ilara, her expression crumbled. Just for a second. Then it rebuilt itself into the stern practicality that Ilara had known since childhood. "You ridiculous girl," Cora said. She crossed the room and pulled Ilara into a one-armed hug that smelled like antiseptic and the lavender oil Cora rubbed into her temples for headaches. "You ridiculous, brave, idiotic girl." You swallowed it. It was the only thing I could think of. Cora pulled back and looked at her. Really looked. Then her eyes slid to the Alpha King, who was standing in the doorway of the treatment room with an expression that suggested he would stand in that doorway for the rest of his natural life, if that was what was required. "Alpha Dracos," Cora said carefully. "May I examine my patient?" Ilara felt his reluctance like a physical thing, a tension in the air like the moment before a thunderstorm. Then he stepped back. One step. He did not leave the doorway. Cora guided Ilara to the examination table and helped her lie down. The table was cold through the thin fabric of her shirt. Cora's fingers, despite the broken arm, were still sure and gentle as she pressed around Ilara's abdomen. "The moonstone is stable," Cora murmured. "I can feel it." She paused, her brow furrowing. "But it should not be stable. It should be rejecting your tissue. An Omega's body does not have the lunar resonance to sustain a moonstone." Her fingers moved lower, pressing carefully. "Unless—" She went quiet. Her hands stopped moving. She looked up at Ilara with an expression Ilara had never seen on her face before. Not in 23 years of knowing this woman who had fed her, clothed her, taught her, and occasionally cuffed her ear for mislabeling the foxglove. "Fear," Cora Ilara said. "What is it?" "Your body is not rejecting the moonstone," Cora said slowly, "because the moonstone is recognizing you." She swallowed hard. "It is bonding to you, Ilara, integrating with your system, the way it would only bond to a direct descendant of the Silverpine founding bloodline." "That is impossible," Ilara said. "I am an Omega. My mother was a packless Omega. My father was a drifter." "Your mother," Cora said, and her voice was strange now, tight and careful, like someone walking across ice, was not packless. She was. She stopped her. Her eyes darted to the doorway, where the Alpha King stood motionless, listening. She was hidden here. By me. The treatment room went silent, except for the steady drip of an IV bag that one of the Iron Fang medics had left running and forgotten about. "What do you mean?" Hidden, Ilara whispered. Cora closed her eyes. When she opened them, the fear was still there. But there was also something else. Relief. The kind that comes from setting down a weight carried too long. "Your mother's name was not Lyra Voss," she said. "It was Lyra Mooncrest. She was the last surviving daughter of the Silverpine Alpha bloodline. The true bloodline. Not Garrett's family, who took the Alpha seat by force 30 years ago. Your mother." She paused. "Your mother was the rightful Alpha. The moonstone detonated. Not exploded. Detonated. Silver light poured from Ilara's body like liquid, flooding the treatment room, running across the floor and up the walls, illuminating every crack and stain and imperfection with merciless clarity. The old language appeared in the light-spiraling text that none of them could read, but all of them could feel a vibration that settled in the marrow and said, "This is true. This is blood. This is lineage." Ilara arched off the table. The pain was extraordinary. Not the burn of the initial swallowing, but something deeper structural, as if her bones were being rewritten from the inside. She could feel her wolf, her supposed non-existent wolf, not stirring this time, but thrashing, throwing itself against walls that had contained it for 23 years, walls that were now crumbling under the Moonstone's recognition. She screamed, and the Alpha King was there. She did not see him move. One moment he was in the doorway, and the next his hands were on her shoulders, pressing her down his face, inches from hers, his amber eyes blazing with something between terror and awe. "Look at me," he said. "Ilara. Look at me." She could not. The light was too bright. The pain was too vast. She was falling into herself, into a place where 12,000 lives pressed against her consciousness, 600 years of memory and birth and death and love and war, all of it pouring through the Moonstone into her blood. Then she felt it. His heartbeat. Steady, unshakable. The same rhythm the Moonstone had synchronized to in the cellar. She focused on it like a drowning woman focuses on a rope, pulling herself toward it, hand over hand, until the light dimmed and the pain receded to a deep, full body ache, and she was lying on the examination table, staring up at the most feared Alpha in 6 territories, who was looking at her like she was something sacred. "There you are," he breathed. Her eyes had changed. She could feel it before Cora confirmed it. The healer held up a small mirror with a trembling hand, and Ilara saw her own face staring back. The scar was still there. The sharp cheekbones, the dark circles. But her eyes, which had been a muddy brown her entire life, were now silver. Pure silver, shot through with veins of gold, like moonlight reflected in amber. Goddess above Cora whispered. "She is Mooncrest," the Alpha King said. His voice held the weight of someone who had just watched a myth become flesh. His hand was still on her shoulder, and he showed no inclination to remove it. "She is the true Silverpine bloodline. Word spread the way word always spreads in a small pack, like wildfire in dry grass. Within the hour, every surviving member of the Silverpine pack knew that the scarred Omega who sorted herbs was not an Omega at all, that the Moonstone, the sacred stone that should have dissolved her organs, had instead recognized her, that her eyes had turned silver, that the Alpha King of the Iron Fang Dominion had not left her side. Garrett arrived at the clinic with 4 of his remaining warriors. His face was a mask of carefully constructed concern. "We should move the Moonstone to a secure location," he said, addressing Kyle rather than Ilara. "Until healer Cora can perform the extraction, the sacred artifact cannot remain inside." He paused, searching for the right word. "Host." "She is not a host," Kyle said. He was sitting in a chair beside the examination table that was too small for him, his long legs stretched out, one hand resting on the table beside Ilara's hand, not quite touching, but close enough that she could feel his warmth. "She is a vessel. There is a difference. With respect, Alpha Dracos, this is a Silverpine internal matter. The Moonstone belongs to our pack. Its security is our responsibility. You had sentries guarding it tonight." Kyle's voice was mild. "How did that work out?" Garrett's mask slipped. Just for a moment. Underneath it, Ilara saw something she didn't expect. Not anger. Not calculation. Exhaustion. The deep, bone-level exhaustion of a man who had been pretending to be something he was not for 30 years, and had just watched the evidence of that pretense walk out of a cellar glowing like a star. "She is dangerous," Garrett said quietly. And for a single strange moment, his voice was not political. It was honest. "You do not understand what the Mooncrest bloodline carries. It is not just alpha power. The founding line was blessed by the Moon Goddess directly. They could command any wolf within their territory, Any wolf, regardless of pack loyalty, regardless of bond. She paused, looked at Elara, and in his eyes she saw something she had never expected to see from the man who had publicly disowned her name. Fear, yes, but also a fragile, reluctant recognition. Your mother could do it, he said. She could walk into a room, and every wolf would submit. She did not even have to try. It just happened. That is why my father killed her. The words hit the room like a physical blow. Cora made a sound. The warriors behind Garrett shifted uncomfortably. Kyle went very still. He did not say that one of the warriors muttered. He did, Garrett said. And his voice was tired, so tired. My father murdered Lyra Mooncrest because he could not control a wolf who could control everyone, and he put me on the alpha seat and told me to hold it, and I have held it for 30 years, and I am tired. He looked at Kyle. I am telling you this because you need to understand what you are claiming. She is not just a mate. She is an apex predator who does not know her own teeth. Then I will teach her, Kyle said. Garrett stared at him for a long moment. Then he did something that shocked everyone in the room, including himself. He laughed, a short, harsh bark of a laugh that held no humor but a great deal of something else. Recognition, maybe. The acknowledgement of one complicated man by another. Then he turned and walked out, and his warriors followed, and the clinic was quiet again. Elara lay on the examination table and stared at the ceiling and tried to process the fact that her entire identity had just detonated. Her mother was not a packless Omega. Her mother was a murdered Alpha. Her father was not a drifter, or maybe he was. That part she still did not know. The scar on her face, the years of hunger, the supply closet bedroom, the mislabeled foxglove and the sorted herbs and the invisibility of being nobody in a pack of somebodies, all of it sat on her chest like a stone. I need air, she said. The Alpha King stood immediately. He looked at Cora, who nodded, and then he walked beside Elara as she made her way to the clinic's back door, which opened onto a small garden where Cora grew her medicinal plants. The night air hit her face, and she breathed it in, cold and sharp, carrying smoke from the still-burning buildings, and underneath that, the green smell of the garden, sage and thyme, and the particular wet earth scent that meant rain was coming. She sat on the wooden bench by the rosemary bushes. Kyle stood beside her, then, after a moment, sat beside her, which was unusual because the bench was designed for one normal-sized person, and he was not normal-sized. His thigh pressed against hers. Neither of them moved away. You knew, she said. In the cellar. Before the moonstone reacted, you knew what I was. I knew what you are to me, he said. He was looking at the garden, at the neat rows of herbs silver in the moonlight. His profile in the dark was all hard angles and shadow. My wolf recognized you the moment I entered that cellar. The scent. He paused. Rosemary and moonlight and something underneath that I have no word for. My wolf nearly broke my ribs trying to get to you. I do not have a wolf, she said, and then corrected herself. I did not think I had a wolf. She was locked away, he said, by whoever hid you, to protect you. A Mooncrest wolf manifesting in Silver Pine territory would have been a death sentence, Cora Elara said softly. Cora locked my wolf. She saved your life. Elara closed her eyes. The moonstone pulsed against her stomach, warm and steady, synchronized with the heartbeat of the man sitting beside her. She could feel the bond between them. Not just the mate bond, though. That was there a golden thread that hummed with each shared breath. But something else. The moonstone connecting to him through her, as if it recognized his heartbeat as a safe harbor. I need to tell you something, she said. I do not know how to be what you think I am. I sought herbs. I sleep in a supply closet. The fanciest meal I have ever eaten was a stew that Cora made for my 16th birthday with actual beef in it. I have never led anything. I have never commanded anyone. I spent 23 years being invisible, and I was. She hesitated. I was good at it. Being invisible was the only thing I was good at. He turned to look at her. In the moonlight, his amber eyes were burnished gold, and the scar through his eyebrow made him look like a painting of a war god, something ancient and slightly broken and infinitely dangerous. I spent 8 years conquering territories, he said. I united 6 warring packs into a dominion. I have killed in battle and in judgment. I have held dying soldiers and signed execution orders and built a kingdom from blood and compromise, and the kind of politics that makes you want to wash your hands until they bleed. He paused. And in 8 years, no one has ever looked at me without fear. Not my generals, not my advisors, not the wolves who call me king. He turned back to the garden. In the cellar, when I asked who hurt you, you did not flinch from me. You flinched from my hand, not from me. Do you understand the difference? She did. She did not know how, but she did. I am going to ask you something, he said. And you can say no. You should understand that. Kyle Drakos doesn't often offer choices, but I am offering you one. What is the question? Come with me, he said, to Iron Fang. Let Cora come with you. Let me give you time to understand what you are, what the moonstone means, what the bond means. He turned to face her fully, and his expression was stripped bare in a way that looked like it cost him something. I am asking, not commanding. She looked at him. At this scarred, enormous, terrifying man who had run 15 miles in 23 minutes because he heard a pack in trouble and found something else entirely, who had told his own soldier to wait, who had draped his jacket over her shoulders and crouched in a cellar that smelled like mouse droppings, and looked at her like the answer to everything. The moonstone pulsed, his heartbeat, her heartbeat, the same rhythm. Okay, she said. The journey to Iron Fang territory took 4 hours. Kyle had arrived with a strike force of 30 wolves. They ran in formation, silent and terrifying, through forests so thick the moonlight filtered down in silver coins. Elara rode in an armored transport, a modified vehicle that handled the rough terrain with mechanical efficiency, with Cora beside her, the healer's broken arm, now properly set and bandaged by one of the Iron Fang medics. Cora had not spoken since they left Silverpine. She sat with her good hand on her knee, her eyes fixed on something in the middle distance, her lips pressed into a thin line. You should be angry with me, Cora said finally. I am Elara said. A little. Only a little. You kept me alive. Elara watched the trees blur past the window. I am having trouble being angry at the woman who kept me alive by hiding everything about who I am. I made a promise to your mother, Cora said. Her voice cracked on the word mother. On the night you were born. She was bleeding out and she put you in my arms and she said, keep her invisible. Keep her alive. Cora's hand tightened on her knee. She knew what Garrett's father had done. She knew he would kill you too. Hiding your wolf was the only way. The man she mentioned, Elara, said carefully. My father, the drifter. Was he actually a drifter? Cora was quiet for a long time. Long enough that the transport crested a ridge and Elara saw the Iron Fang stronghold for the first time, and the sight drove the question temporarily from her mind. It was not a castle. It was a fortress carved into the side of a mountain, stone and steel and glass ancient architecture, married to modern engineering with lights burning in hundreds of windows like a constellation brought to Earth. A waterfall cascaded down the eastern face, catching the moonlight and turning it to silver thread. The surrounding forest had been cleared for half a mile in every direction, creating a killing field that spoke to practical paranoia and excellent military planning. The transport entered through a tunnel carved through solid rock, wide enough for 3 vehicles abreast, and emerged into an underground garage that smelled like concrete and motor oil, and the particular ozone tang of high-tech security systems. Kyle was waiting when they stepped out. He had shifted back from wolf form and was wearing only loose trousers, his torso bare, and Elara saw the full map of his body for the first time. He was covered in scars, not the single dramatic scar of a man who had one bad encounter. Dozens of scars, claw marks across his ribs, a stab wound long healed below his left clavicle, burn marks on his forearms, a wolf's bite on his shoulder, the tooth marks still visible. His body was a document of violence survived, and beneath the scars the muscle was dense and defined, not the aesthetic muscle of someone who exercised for appearance, but the functional mass of someone who fought for survival. He was also, she noticed with a detachment that felt borrowed from someone else, breathtaking. Your rooms are ready, he said, addressing both of them but looking at Elara. The medical wing is staffed. We can begin the Moonstone assessment in the morning. I can start tonight, Cora said. You have a broken arm, Kyle said. I have had a broken arm before. It did not stop me then either. He looked at Cora. She looked back at him. Some silent negotiation occurred. He inclined his head. They were given rooms in the residential wing adjacent suites with a shared sitting room. The furniture was heavy and dark and smelled like cedar. The bed was enormous. Elara stood in the bedroom and ran her hand over the sheets, which were linen, real linen, not the coarse cotton she was used to. The room had a window that looked out over the valley, and the moonlight poured in like water. She sat on the edge of the bed and pressed her hand to her stomach. The moonstone pulsed. Steady, warm. Synchronized with a heartbeat, she could feel, even though its owner was several floors away. I can feel you, she whispered to the empty room, and she did not know if she was talking to the moonstone or to him. The next 3 days were a blur of medical assessments and political complications and the slow, terrifying process of becoming visible. Cora ran tests. Bloodwork lunar resonance scans the old diagnostic rituals that required chalk circles and specific herbs burned in specific sequences. The results confirmed what the Moonstone had already declared. Elara was Mooncrest. Full-blooded, her wolf locked since birth by Cora's binding ritual, was not a standard wolf. It was a lunar alpha, the rarest classification, a wolf that drew power directly from the moon and could, theoretically, command any wolf within a territory simply by will. Theoretically, because no lunar alpha had existed in over a century. The bloodline was supposed to be extinct. Kyle's advisors were divided. His general, a woman named Thessa, with close cropped grey hair and a prosthetic left hand, argued for a public alliance announcement. Your mate is a Mooncrest heir, she said, standing over a tactical map in the war room, while Elara sat in the corner, trying to be invisible and failing completely because the Alpha King kept glancing at her. This is not just romantic. This is political. The other territories will either kneel or attack. We need to be ready for both. His chancellor, a thin man named Dorian, who smelled like old paper and peppermint tea, argued for secrecy. If the other alphas learn that a lunar alpha has resurfaced, he said they will unite against Iron Fang. Not out of aggression, out of fear, A lunar alpha mated to the strongest conventional alpha in 6 territories. He adjusted his spectacles. That is the kind of power concentration that starts wars. Kyle listened to both. He sat at the head of the war table, one hand resting on the surface, the other hanging at his side, and his face gave nothing away. He was a different creature in this room, not the man who had sat on a garden bench and offered her a choice. This was the king, the conqueror, the wolf who had united 6 packs by being smarter and stronger and more ruthless than anyone who opposed him. Then he turned to Elara. "What do you think?" he said. The room went silent. Thessa and Dorian exchanged a look. Elara's first instinct was to say nothing, to defer, to be invisible. She felt the old habit rise in her like bile. Then she felt the moonstone pulse, and with it came something that was not the moonstone at all. It was her wolf. Awake now. Not fully unleashed, Cora was working on a gradual unbinding to prevent the kind of catastrophic emergence they had seen in the clinic, but present, alert, and her wolf had opinions. "The secrecy will not hold," Elara said. Her voice sounded strange in this room full of military and political authority, too quiet, too uncertain. But the words were right. Garrett knows. His warriors know. Every wolf in Silverpine saw my eyes change. By now, every pack within 2 territories has heard some version of the story. She swallowed. Trying to hide it will look like weakness, or like we are afraid. She paused. "Are we afraid?" Kyle looked at her. Something moved behind his eyes. Not surprise exactly. Recognition. The kind you feel when someone confirms something you already suspected. "No," he said. "We are not afraid." The announcement went out that evening. A formal declaration from the Iron Fang Dominion. The Alpha King had found his fated mate. She was Mooncrest. She was under his protection. Any challenge to either of these facts would be treated as a declaration of war. The responses came fast. 3 territories sent congratulations, formal political carefully worded. 2 territories sent nothing, which was its own message. And the 6th territory, the Eastern Coalition, sent a single messenger with a single question. Is she truly Mooncrest? Or is this a fabrication to legitimize Iron Fang expansion? The messenger was a young beta woman with red hair and a visible tremor in her left hand. She stood in the great hall, which was vast and stone-floored, and lit by a chandelier made of antlers and iron, and delivered her alpha's words without flinching. Kyle stood on the raised platform at the hall's north end, Elara beside him, Cora and Thessa and Dorian arranged behind them. The moonstone had been pulsing stronger all day, and silver light flickered beneath Elara's shirt, like heat lightning. "Tell your Alpha," Kyle said, "that the Mooncrest bloodline is confirmed by the bonding of the Silverpine moonstone. If he doubts this, he is welcome to visit and see for himself." He paused. "If he doubts my word, he is welcome to challenge me directly." The messenger left. The tremor in her hand had spread to her whole arm. That night, Elara couldn't sleep. The moonstone was restless, pulsing in irregular patterns, and she could feel something building in her body, a pressure like water behind a dam. She got up and walked the corridors of the fortress in bare feet, wearing a sleep shirt that Kale's staff had provided, which was silk and finer than anything she had ever worn, and made her feel like a child playing dress-up. She found him in the library, a room she had not known existed until she followed the scent of wood smoke and old leather down 2 flights of stairs and through a door that should have been locked but opened at her touch. He was sitting in a leather armchair beside a dying fire, reading a book that looked old enough to crumble. He was wearing loose trousers and nothing else, and the firelight painted his scars in copper and shadow. He looked up when she entered, and did not seem surprised. "Can you feel it too?" she said. "The pressure." "Since this afternoon," he said. He set the book aside. "It is building toward something." She sat in the chair across from him. The fire between them had collapsed to embers orange and red, pulsing with their own rhythm. "I am afraid," she said. It was the first time she had said it aloud. "Not of you. Not of the other packs. Of myself. Of what happens when Cora finishes the unbinding, and I become whatever I am supposed to become." He was quiet for a moment. Then he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and the firelight caught his eyes and turned them molten. "When I was 19, he said, I killed my father's beta in single combat. The beta had challenged my father for the alpha seat, and my father was too old and too sick to fight. So I fought instead." His voice was level factual. I was terrified. Not of dying, of winning. Because winning meant I was the kind of creature who could kill a man with his hands. And I did not know if I wanted to be that creature. "What did you do?" she asked. "I won," he said. "And then I went into the forest and vomited for an hour. And then I came back, and I was the alpha, and I have been the alpha every day since, and some days it fits like armor, and some days it fits like a coffin." He met her eyes. "You will be afraid. That is correct. That is what it means to carry power you did not ask for. But you do not carry it alone." The moonstone pulsed. His heartbeat. Her heartbeat. The fire crackled. "Show me," she said. And she did not entirely know what she was asking, but he did. He stood and extended his hand. She took it. His fingers closed around hers, warm and calloused and certain, and he led her through the library to a door she had not noticed, which opened onto a balcony that jutted out from the mountainside like a stone tongue. The valley spread below them, forests and rivers, and the distant glimmer of pack settlements, all of it silver and blue, under a moon that was nearly full. He stood behind her close enough that she could feel his heat against her back, but not quite touching. His hands came to rest on her shoulders lightly, and his thumbs pressed into the tight muscle at the base of her neck. "Close your eyes," he said. His breath was warm against her temple. "Feel the moonstone. Find its frequency." She closed her eyes. The moonstone was there, pulsing a small sun in her belly. She focused on it, and the world narrowed to that single point of light, and then expanded outward in a rush that stole her breath. She could feel them. All of them, every wolf in the valley below. Not their thoughts, not their emotions, but their heartbeats. Hundreds of heartbeats, each one distinct like individual instruments in an orchestra, and the moonstone was the conductor, and she was the concert hall. Oh, she breathed. "What do you feel?" he murmured. "Everyone." His hands tightened on her shoulders, not painfully, possessively, and underneath the possessiveness, something gentler. Pride. Then below them in the valley, a wolf howled, a single voice, long and mournful, and then another, and another. Dozens of wolves raising their voices to the moon, and Elara could feel each howl resonate in the moonstone, could feel the ancient connection between stone and wolf and moon vibrating through her body like a tuning fork. "They feel you," Kyle said. His voice was rough. "They feel the moonstone through you." She opened her eyes. The valley was alive with wolf song, and the moon hung overhead like a blessing, and for the first time in her life, Elara Voss felt less like an afterthought and more like a beginning. The Eastern Coalition attacked 3 days later. They came at dawn, which was unusual, because wolves traditionally attacked at night when their senses were sharpest. But Alpha Corvin, of the Eastern Coalition, was not a traditional wolf. He was a tactician who had studied human military strategy, and he knew that attacking at dawn meant catching the night patrols at shift change, the most vulnerable 20 minutes in any security rotation. The first explosion hit the eastern watchtower. Elara was in the medical wing with Cora when the fortress shook and glass shattered, and the alarm system screamed to life, a sound like 1,000 wolves howling through metal. "Get to the safe room," Cora said immediately. Her hands were steady, even as the floor shook beneath them. Now Elara. But the moonstone was doing something. Pulsing hard, painfully hard, each beat, sending silver light radiating from her body, and with each pulse she could feel the attackers. Not just their heartbeats, their positions. 47 wolves breaching the eastern perimeter, 12 more circling north, and something else. Something she could not identify. A wrongness. A void where heartbeats should be, but were not. "There is something wrong," she said. "They have something with them. Something that is not wolf." Another explosion. Closer. The lights in the medical wing flickered and died. Emergency generators kicked in, bathing everything in red. Elara Cora said urgently. She ran. Not to the safe room. Through the corridors of the fortress, following the moonstone's pull, which was leading her not down to safety, but up toward the battlements, toward the noise, and the smoke, and the chaos. She burst through a door onto the main rampart, and the world was fire. The eastern slope of the mountain was ablaze. Coalition wolves in shifted form surged up the hillside, their fur black against the orange flames, and iron-fanged defenders met them with disciplined ferocity. The clash of bodies was thunderous. Blood sprayed in arcs that the firelight turned to rubies. And in the center of it all, Kyle. He was in half-shift, the form between human and wolf that only the strongest alphas could maintain. He stood 9 feet tall, his body a fusion of man and beast, covered in black fur. His hands ending in claws, the length of kitchen knives. His amber eyes blazing in a face that was neither human nor wolf, but something terrible and beautiful and ancient. He was fighting 3 coalition wolves simultaneously, and winning, moving with a speed that defied his size, each strike precise and devastating. But the wrongness she had felt was there. Behind the main assault force, moving up the slope in a tight formation, 12 figures in black robes. They moved too smoothly, too quietly, and around them a sphere of nullification. No wolf could approach within 20 feet without staggering, weakening their shift, faltering. "Wolfsbane mages," said a voice beside her. Thessa the general was on the rampart, her prosthetic hand replaced with a weapon attachment that Elara didn't want to examine closely. Corvin hired human witches, Wolfsbane enhanced nullifiers. They suppress our shift within their radius. Her jaw tightened. If they reach the fortress interior, our wolves will not be able to fight. Elara watched the black-robed figures advance. The moonstone was screaming inside her now, not pain but urgency, a frequency that made her teeth ache and her vision blur. She could feel the nullification field pushing against her awareness, trying to dim the connection she felt to every wolf on the battlefield. "Can the defenders stop them?" she asked. "No," Thessa said flatly. "Any wolf that enters the field loses their shift. We lose our greatest advantage." She looked at Elara. The only thing that might counter wolfsbane nullification is lunar energy. Raw lunar energy. She paused. The kind a moonstone carries. Ilara understood. She understood with a clarity that was not her own, that came from the 12,000 lives stored in the stone in her belly, 6 centuries of wisdom pouring through her in a flood of knowing. "I need to get down there," she said. Thessa stared at her. "You are unmated, unshifted, carrying a sacred artifact that half the continent wants to steal, and you want to run into a battlefield." "Yes." The general studied her for 3 seconds. Then she unholstered a short blade from her belt and handed it to Ilara handle first. "Stay behind the front line," she said. "Get within range of the mages. Do whatever the moonstone is telling you to do. And for the love of the goddess, do not die. The Alpha will burn this continent to the ground if you die." Ilara took the blade and ran. The battlefield was nothing like she expected. It was not dramatic or cinematic. It was mud and blood, and noise so loud it became a physical pressure against her eardrums. She ran through the gap between the fortress wall and the main engagement, where the ground was torn earth, and the smoke was so thick she could taste it, charcoal and chemicals, and the copper tang of blood. She felt Kyle sense her. Across the battlefield in the middle of his own fight, his head snapped toward her. His wolf's howl split the air, a sound of pure rage and terror, and she felt his intent to abandon his position and get to her, felt it through the bond like a physical pull. "No," she thought, pushing the thought toward him through the bond with everything she had. "Stay. Fight. Trust me." She did not know if he heard, but he did not come. His howl cut short, and she felt his attention refocus, and she ran. The nullification field hit her like a wall of cold water. Her muscles seized. The breath left her lungs. The world went grey and distant, and she felt the moonstone sputter its pulse, faltering for the first time since she had swallowed it. Then something else happened. Her wolf woke up. Not the gradual awakening Cora had been managing. A full catastrophic emergence, triggered by the moonstone's distress, like a guard dog hearing an intruder. The wolf surged from whatever cage had held it for 23 years, and slammed into Ilara's consciousness with a force that dropped her to her knees in the mud. The world became everything. Every smell, every sound, every vibration in the earth and the air. She could hear individual heartbeats. She could smell the wolfsbane on the mage's robes, bitter and acrid. She could feel the moonstone reigniting in her belly, fueled by the wolf's emergence, the two forces feeding each other in a spiral of escalating power. Silver light erupted from her body. Not the gentle glow of the clinic, not the bright flash of the revelation. This was a blast wave, a sphere of pure lunar energy that expanded outward from her kneeling form, and where it met the nullification field shattered. The mages staggered. 2 of them fell. The suppression field flickered, collapsed, and every Iron Fang wolf within range felt their power flood back. Shifts stabilized, strength returned. The battle line, which had been bending under the mage's influence, surged forward. The lead mage, a tall figure in black, turned toward Ilara. She could see his face beneath the hood. Old, weathered, human. His eyes were wide with something she recognized because she had worn it herself for 23 years. "Fear, what are you?" he whispered. The moonstone answered for her. Another pulse stronger than the last, and the silver light condensed into something coherent, something shaped, and Ilara felt herself shift for the first time in her life. It was not like the descriptions in the old texts. It was not graceful or beautiful. It was violent and painful, and her bones cracked and reformed, and her skin tore and rebuilt, and she screamed, and the scream became a howl. Her wolf was white, pure white, the color of fresh snow, the color of moonlight on still water. And she was enormous. Not as large as Kyle's war form, but close, and her eyes were silver moons in a white face, and the moonstone's light poured from her fur like she was made of it. The mages ran. The ones who could still stand turned and fled down the hillside, their robes catching on thorns and rocks, their nullification artifacts dark and useless. The coalition wolves, seeing their secret weapon, neutralized, and a lunar alpha standing in their path faltered. And then Kyle was there. His massive half-shifted form moved through the remaining attackers like a black storm through wheat. He was beside her in moments, his wolf and hers together on the burning hillside, and the sight of them, the white wolf glowing with moonlight, and the black war form burning with rage, was enough to break the coalition's advance entirely. The retreat was swift and disorganized. Corvin's forces fled down the mountain, pursued by Iron Fang wolves, who harried them until they crossed the territorial boundary and kept running. The Wolfsbane mages scattered into the forest and disappeared. By the time the sun was fully up, the battle was over. Elara shifted back. This was also not graceful. She ended up on her hands and knees in the mud, naked, and shaking the moonstone, pulsing weakly in her stomach, her muscles twitching with aftershocks. Kyle shifted back beside her and wrapped his arms around her and pulled her against his chest, and she could feel him shaking too. She pressed her face into his neck and breathed. Pine and smoke and wolf, his heartbeat hammering against her cheek. The moonstone struggling to match it, finding the rhythm locking in. "You," he said, and his voice was wrecked, raw, and broken, in a way she had never heard it, terrified me. "I know. Never again." She pulled back enough to look at his face. He was covered in blood, some his most not. And there were new cuts across his arms and a gash on his ribs that was already healing. His amber eyes were wild wolf, still close to the surface, and his hands on her bare skin were trembling. "You cannot ask me that," she said, quietly. "You cannot ask me to not be what I am. You said you would teach me. This is what I am." He stared at her. His jaw worked. Then something in his expression shifted, cracked, rebuilt. He rested his forehead against hers, and his breath was warm and unsteady, and he closed his eyes. "Then I will be beside you," he said. "Every time. Do you understand? I will be beside you every time." She put her hand over his heart, felt it beating, felt the moonstone match it, felt the bond between them pulse with something that had no name, but felt like home. "Okay," she said. The same word she had said in the garden 3 days and a lifetime ago. The claiming ceremony took place under the full moon, 3 nights after the battle. Iron Fang tradition held that the alpha's mate was claimed in the presence of the pack under open sky, with the moon as witness. The clearing chosen was a natural amphitheater in the forest north of the fortress, a bowl of earth and stone surrounded by ancient pines with a flat granite altar at its center that had been used for this purpose for centuries. The pack assembled in a circle, warriors, elders, families, pups. Thessa stood at attention in her dress uniform, her prosthetic hand polished to a mirror shine. Dorian clutched his notes and his peppermint tea and tried not to look overwhelmed by the outdoors. Cora stood near the front, her arm out of the sling, now her face set in an expression that could have been maternal pride or clinical concern or both, and Garrett was there. Elara had not expected that. He stood at the edge of the circle alone, without his warriors wearing simple clothes. When her eyes found him, he held her gaze for a moment, and then lowered his head. Not quite a bow. An acknowledgement. Ilara wore white, a simple dress, no adornment, nothing like the elaborate gowns she had seen in paintings of royal ceremonies. She had chosen it herself because it reminded her of her wolf, and because she was done wearing other people's expectations. The moonstone pulsed with the rhythm of the moon, overhead silver light flickering beneath the white fabric, and every wolf in the clearing could feel it. She could feel them feeling it. Hundreds of heartbeats, hundreds of wolves, all of them resonating with the stone she carried. Kyle waited at the altar. He wore black because he was Kyle, and wearing anything else would have been ridiculous. His face, normally so controlled, was open in a way she had only seen in the library by the dying fire. The war mask was gone. The king mask was gone. He was just the man who had crouched in a cellar that smelled like rosemary and mouse droppings, and recognized her. She walked to him through the circle of wolves. The pine needles were soft under her bare feet. The air smelled like sap and wood smoke and night. She reached the altar and stopped. They stood facing each other, and the moonlight fell on them both like a benediction. The elder who performed the ceremony was a woman so old she seemed to be held together by tradition and stubbornness. She spoke the words in the old language, and Ilara understood them not because she knew the language, but because the moonstone translated them directly into her blood. Do you recognize this wolf? Do you accept this bond? Do you bind your heartbeat to hers until the moon falls from the sky and the last wolf forgets how to howl? I do, Kyle said, and his voice carried to every ear in the clearing without effort. Then he stepped forward and tilted her head gently, exposing the curve of her neck where it met her shoulder. His breath was hot against her skin. She could feel his wolf pressing forward, could feel the barely leashed intensity of it, the primal drive to mark, to claim, to make permanent what the bond had already declared. His teeth pressed against her skin. Not gently. There was nothing gentle about a claiming bite. But there was precision. Care, the knowledge of exactly how much pressure to apply, how deep to go, how to make the mark without causing unnecessary pain. His fangs half shifted, pierced her skin, and she gasped, not from pain, but from the explosion of sensation that followed. The mate bond sealed. She felt it like a door opening, not into a room, but into a person. Kyle flooded into her awareness, his strength and his fear, and his 8 years of loneliness, and his fierce, terrifying, overwhelming devotion, all of it pouring through the bond like water breaking a dam. And she poured into him. Her years of invisibility, her quiet strength, her fear of being seen, her greater fear of never being seen, all of it flowing through the bite mark on her neck into his blood. The moonstone erupted. Silver light filled the clearing like sunrise, and every wolf present gasped. Some shifted involuntarily, and the ancient pines creaked and groaned as lunar energy saturated the air. The light climbed, spiraling upward into the sky, a column of silver that was visible for miles. In the Silver Pine territory, wolves stopped what they were doing and looked north. In the Eastern Coalition, Alpha Corvin stood on his balcony and watched the silver light paint the horizon, and understood with a cold certainty that the world had changed. In the clearing, the light faded. Kale lifted his head. Her blood stained his lips, and his eyes were pure gold, no amber, just gold wolf, and man unified. Mine, he said. And this time it was spoken aloud, and it was not a claim of ownership. It was a statement of belonging. Mine to protect, mine to fight beside, Mine to love until the concept of love is too small a word for what this is. She reached up and touched the mark on her neck. It was warm. It would be warm for the rest of her life. And through it she could feel him, every heartbeat, every breath, a constant presence that would never leave. Yours, she said, and the moonstone pulsed in agreement, and the pack howled, dozens of voices rising into the night, and the moon hung overhead like it had been waiting for exactly this moment. Elara looked out at the assembled wolves, at Thessa's rare smile, and Dorian's tearful eyes, and Cora's shaking hands at Garrett, standing alone at the edge with an expression that looked almost like peace. She looked at Cale, at his blood-stained lips, and his golden eyes, and the scars that mapped his body like a history of survival. She looked at all of it, and the moonstone pulsed steady and warm, matching the heartbeat of the man beside her, the heartbeat of the pack around her, the heartbeat of a world that was finally, after 23 years, beating in time with hers. The last thing she noticed before the celebration began, and the howling crescendoed, and the night dissolved into warmth and noise, and belonging, was the feeling of the pine needles beneath her bare feet. Cold and sharp and real, the same earth that had been under her feet when she was nothing. The same earth that was under her feet now that she was everything. The earth didn't care. It held her either way. She curled her toes into it, felt the cold, felt the moonstone pulse, and for the first time in her life she did not want to be invisible.